All right, so today we're going deep on something pretty unexpected. We're talking radical Islamist propaganda, but not the kind you might be thinking of. Get shaky videos. We're digging into online magazines. Yeah, magazines.
Sounds kind of old school for terrorist groups, right?
Exactly. Like, who starts a magazine in the age of instant uploads and viral videos? But this research from the U.S. Army War College suggests there's a method to this madness.
It's all about control and reach, really. See, with a magazine, these groups get to curate their message exactly how they want. No algorithms, no pesky fact checkers. Plus, a magazine can reach people even without constant internet access. Think about it.
Makes sense. It's like the difference between a curated art gallery and just plastering flyers on a wall. But it still feels strange. It's like they're trying to make terrorism almost mainstream.
That's the point. They want to normalize their ideology, make it seem less extreme, less foreign, especially to a Western audience.
And this isn't exactly new either, according to this research. The first English-language jihadist magazine popped up online back in 2007.
And since then, we've seen a whole bunch of these publications spring up. Some even target specific regions, like there's one in Swahili called Gaidi Matani, which translates to terrorist in the street, aimed at East Africa, so they're getting pretty strategic with their targeting.
Wow, terrorist in the street, that's a pretty intense title. But it makes you wonder, were these magazines just flashes in the pan, or did some of them actually gain traction?
Well, some were definitely short-lived, but others, surprisingly, had some serious staying power. And here's the thing, they weren't all the same. It wasn't just a one-size-fits-all approach to this propaganda.
Different flavors of extremism, so to speak.
Exactly. The research actually points to these different clusters of magazines, each with its own vibe. Like the ones linked to al-Qaeda had a very distinct tone and message compared to those coming out of ISIS, for example.
So what, like competing brands of terrorism trying to win over recruits?
In a way, yes, each one pushing its own vision of this so-called jihadi culture they're trying to create.
Jihadi culture. There's a phrase you don't hear every day. It's kind of disturbing when you think about it. So are they basically trying to build their own little society, but online?
It's a form of ideological world building, I'd say. They use these magazines to paint a picture of their ideal world, their utopia, if you can even call it that. It's all about creating this sense of belonging, a shared identity, all centered around their extremist ideology.
So we've got all these different flavors of jihadi culture stewing in these online magazines, but two really stand out, right? Inspire from al-Qaeda, and then there's ISIS's Dabiq.
Yeah, those two were definitely the heavy hitters in the game.
And get this, are you ready for this? Both of these magazines, they had American editors.
Yeah, it's a wild story, isn't it? I mean, these weren't just some anonymous guys behind keyboards. These were Americans who actually left the U.S., joined these groups, living in Yemen and Syria, embedded in these organizations.
Talk about a recruitment success story, right? Although a terrifying one, to say the least. And they use that insider knowledge, their understanding of American culture, to craft those messages.
It's scary how effective it could be.
And of course, both of these editors were eventually killed in drone strikes, but not before they influenced who knows how many people. Inspire, especially, had that infamous open source jihad section. It was basically like a how-to guide for lone wolf attacks, just laying it all out there.
Right. Inspire was all about empowering individuals to take action no matter how small, wherever they were. It was like they wanted to make terrorism feel achievable, for the average person.
Just browsing the web, stumble across this.
Exactly. And then Dabiq took a bit of a different approach. They were more focused on the big picture, on luring Westerners to join their so-called caliphate. It was less about immediate action and more about long-term commitment to the cause.
So two different magazines, two different strategies, but with the same goal. Spread terror.
Wow. I mean, didn't Dabiq also take some pretty direct shots at al-Qaeda? It's like a rivalry within a rivalry.
Oh, absolutely. ISIS used Dabiq as a platform to directly criticize al-Qaeda, called them out for being too passive, too willing to compromise. It just goes to show you there are these power struggles and divisions even within these extremist groups.
So they're not just battling the West, they're also battling each other for recruits, for influence.
Exactly. It's a constant competition, even in the world of online terrorist magazines.
Okay, so we've talked strategy, but I gotta say, diving into the actual content of these magazines, let's just say some of the details in this research were pretty chilling.
Yeah, it gets intense.
For example, Inspire went beyond just talking about violence. They actually gave, detailed instructions. Yeah. Like what kind of instructions?
Okay, so we're talking about making bombs in your kitchen, causing car accidents, even starting forest fires. It was like a twisted DIY guide.
It's disturbing, for sure, but it does give you a glimpse into their mindset. They were dead set on not just pushing ideology, but actually inciting action, no matter how horrific.
And then you had Dabiq, which was notorious for those graphic photos of executions, the destruction of cultural sites.
Right, using violence as a spectacle, a way to intimidate, to shock.
Exactly. But here's the thing that really blew me away. It wasn't just about magazines. The Islamic State, they had a whole library of English e-books.
Seriously?
Yeah, with themes like black flags, martyrs, even a guide called How to Survive in the West.
Wow, so it was like a whole curriculum.
Right. And the level of detail in these ebooks, I mean, it's unsettling. It's like they were trying to create this self-sufficient terrorist network, all accessible with a few clicks.
It's a chilling thought, but it shows how they were evolving. As they started losing territory, they shifted from controlling physical space to inspiring global terror online. These ebooks were their new battleground, a way to reach anyone, anywhere.
So it wasn't just about spreading fear and chaos, which is scary enough, but also about creating this network, this global reach.
Absolutely. It's about sowing discord, undermining institutions, creating that constant sense of fear and uncertainty.
It's a lot to process. We started with online magazines, which seems strange enough, and now we've got ebooks, global networks, this whole jihadi culture thing. What are we, the average people scrolling through our feeds, supposed to do with all of this?
Well, first off, don't underestimate the power of just being aware. Recognize their tactics, their propaganda. Be critical of what you see online. Knowledge is power, right?
Because this stuff is designed to be persuasive, to draw people in.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay informed, to be aware of the dangers, and to have those critical thinking skills to navigate this increasingly complex online world.
It's a sobering thought, but an important one. We can't afford to be naive about this. Well, on that note, thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
And for our listeners, stay vigilant, keep asking questions, and remember, knowledge is power.